Welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network, and today's topic is family. That should be interesting when we think about the inheritances that we've received from our family beyond genetics to emotional patterns, possible uh, traumatic memories. I think it'll be an interesting conversation. But before we get started, let's just take a couple minutes to settle in and get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen just flooding your lungs and flowing into your bloodstream and nourishing every cell, every organ of your body, bringing vital life energy. And as you exhale, exhale any stress, any tension, fatigue, negativity. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And this time, imagine brilliant bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your electrons, all your molecules, every cell lighting you up from the inside out and creating a marvelous glow into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining stress, tension, fatigue, negativity. And now let's just gently press our palms together and very softly rub your fingers against your palms just to feel that amazing sensation, to presence yourself to the tickling and the tingling and the wonder of actually feeling in the physical. And bring yourselves present right here, right now. Good morning, good morning, good morning, Tammy. Welcome, and welcome to everybody else who's here joining us. It's great to be here with you. And today we get to talk about family. Family is such a complex topic, but today, and this doesn't make it less complex, but today we're going to talk about family in the context of inherited proclivities, inherited trauma, inherited uh, patterns of emotion, of thought, of being. Good morning, Marianne. Wonderful to have you here with us. So, it occurs to me, it's interesting. You may or may not be aware of family constellation work. But good morning, Christina. Welcome. It's great to have you here. Um, Family constellation work, I'm not an expert on it. I did experience one session, but I don't really want to talk about the work as much as the premise, which I have embraced even without knowing about family constellation work. And the premise is that there are intergenerational, and this is my interpretation. So if you're a family constellation work person, if I'm destroying this, please don't take offense. This is my interpretation, is that it's looking at generational and intergenerational trauma. And I've been thinking a lot lately about family, and it's so interesting to see patterns that repeat from one generation to another. Patterns of relationship, patterns of dysfunction. That there are. It, I have observed, at least in my family, I've observed certain repeating patterns that have gone back to at least my parents, in a certain way. And I don't know if they went back beyond, further generations back, these patterns. Good morning, Robert. Welcome. It's great to have you with us. So we're talking about family, but in the context of generational pattern. And I think that we can actually broaden the notion of family to the human family, like certain traumas or experiences that are part of being human, that are part of us in a way, you know, that we can that we carry messaging from one generation to another. And how we do that is up for grabs. You know, maybe there's encoding in our physical bodies, maybe through our blood or through our DNA or our genetics, that also carry other kinds of patterns. It's interesting as we learn about um, epigenetics, as we learn about our ability to shift our genetic future based on behaviors, you know, how we can um, um, modify our predispositions, for instance, or how we can not succumb to certain genetic predispositions through different behaviors. I think it's fascinating to recognize how um, there things aren't written in stone, but I think that there are a lot of invisible influences that we have. So, for instance, if there's a tendency toward depression, then that that tendency may manifest in through our ancestry, you know, backwards and forwards. The different peoples have different ways of being or different foundations. Like certain peoples are known to be, whether it's true or not, known to be more melancholic than others, or more rigid than others. And the question is this cultural? Is it something having to do with the morphic field? Is it having to do with blood? I've heard that different blood types have different, people with different blood types have different characteristics. Um, I think it's a very, very interesting conversation. I was going to call this, rather than family, I was going to call it unseen influence or invisible influence. Marianne says awareness helps to create the change needed. I agree. What by identifying what's happening, you know, or what might be an influence, then we have a greater capacity to interact with it. Good morning, Rosalind. Great to have you here, as always. And yeah, the M&M morning musings. So today we're talking about really like these unseen influences that impact us beyond our own conscious awareness. And I guess this goes to thinking about that there are certain things in the air, you know, like when it seems that a lot of people are going through something very similar, you know, maybe having to do with the influence of the planets, or maybe having to do with a morphic field, which is the field of resonance where we're all interconnected and communicating with one another. But I was thinking of it especially in the context of family, and how um, patterns in families repeat. And so how is it that that happens? Well, when we're kids, we are shaped by our environment to a great degree, right? We have the influences that are within our environment. And so if we are having traumatic experiences as children, those carry forward into our lives. And then we get to think back on, well, the parents that may have really assisted in creating these traumatic experiences had their own experiences, and most likely had their own traumatic experiences that they're now perpetuating, or behaviors that they're perpetuating when they become parents, and their parents had traumatic experiences, and it goes back and back and back. And it's maybe not a direct linear connection, but it's interesting. When we were talking yesterday about how how sometimes, actually a lot of times, the children of abuse can become abusers. Now you can go, thankfully, with awareness and consciousness, you can go completely the other way, which is a beautiful thing, to be able to heal from that and to be able to actually make different choices. But the thing is that our first relationships are the relationships with, typically with family, that teach us how to give and receive attention, affection, love, how to react to different situations. So what if depression is a learned behavior? What if anger is a learned behavior? I don't know that it is, but I think that there are certainly circumstances where it is. My family was very, very, very angry, and I learned anger. Boy, that was my first response pretty much to anything, was rage and fury. And over years and years, that's shifted. I've worked on that, and it's not the case anymore, thankfully, because that was very oppressive. But it was the way that I showed up in the world for a long time. And in my family, that was learned. And I see it being passed down, generationally. Rosalind says, my friend said something profound the other day. She said, our parents are the refined version of their parents. Exactly. That's exactly what we're talking about. And maybe not refined, but there's some version, we would hope that we become more refined. So Rosalind says, so imagine how rough our parents had it if they're healing from their upbringing. She made a point to say our parents are doing the best they can, whatever that may look like. And I tend to believe that people are doing the best they can, no matter what, even though sometimes it's really not, even though it's sometimes really bad, they're still doing the best they can, for sure. And so Robert says, exactly. We can carry around whatever influences, behaviors, actions, and energies from 7 generations before us. That's what I'm working on now to clear for myself. So I love that you said that, Robert, 7 generations before us. What I understand about healing is that as we heal ourselves, we heal the past generations and the future generations, that it moves through time. And because we are all connected, and perhaps time doesn't exist. So in healing ourselves, we heal one another. And Rosalind says, uh, thank you, Carolina Rodriguez, for helping me see that realization. Um, that's your friend who was talking about the lineage of parents. Beautiful, and good for you to give her a shout out, Rosalind. That's awesome. So yeah, I think that we get to see ourselves as part of. I mean, we often blame ourselves for our failings, or what we are interpreting as our failings. And we often make ourselves wrong without recognizing that it, we're not really existing in a vacuum, that we didn't come from nowhere, and our behaviors, our reactions, our way of being is not an isolated, and it's not an anomaly. Typically we're part of a lineage, and we get to wake up in order to heal ourselves, and to heal the generations before us and coming from us forward. Robert says, or regenerations. I love it. Regeneration. I love it. What a wonderful way to think about that. As we think about generations, we are regenerating. That's pretty cool. And we talk about regeneration as bringing back health, bringing back life, bringing back vitality. So we can use the word in both ways at once. It fits. And so I wonder, as you think on your family, as you think about your family, what kinds of patterns do you see that repeat themselves? What kinds of estrangements, what kinds of conflicts, what kinds of emotional patterns, what kinds of trauma do you see having been in the family, and as you look backward, and even within certain cultures, we can consider our cultures as a family as well. Welcome, Lisa. Good morning. Great to have you here with us. Um, so we can look at cultures, we can look at countries, we can look at our religious affiliations, and the characteristics and the trauma and the patterning that exists within the groups that we're engaged with in our lives, and see how we kind of take these things on. We inherit some of these influences without even awareness of it. And I know when I was growing up, well, I am very empathic, and I had no concept of what empathic um, abilities were. And I ended up feeling so many feelings that I don't believe were my own. Being sensitive to these feelings as I was growing up, and feeling those feelings, I didn't know that they weren't mine until I was at least in my later teens. Maybe it occurred to me perhaps that not all these feelings were mine. It might have even been later than that. And so when you take on all the feelings of other people that aren't your own somehow, and take ownership of them as if they are your own, it creates certain patterns, right, to be experiencing those things. And I just find this notion of inheritance really fascinating. So Elaine says, interesting you're having this conversation, as I just experienced with the family yesterday who find themselves in a very awake and shocking and painful place in this moment. Interesting. And so I know that, Elaine, you've gone through some very radical awakenings yourself, and it's interesting to recognize what these patterns are. So I think it's possible to be carrying the imprint of trauma from generations and generations ago. I think it's possible to be carrying the imprint of our human history and believing it's our own. And pretty awesome to be able to consciously engage in releasing that trauma. So Robert says, from the parent side, separation. That's the pattern. From the father's side, addictions. From my grandparents, restraint, mostly financially. Awesome to be able to identify those things, Robert. So, when we look at the challenges of our family, we can look and see if what the correlation is with our own individual challenges. We learn how to keep ourselves separate. We learn how to interact with people, or to cut people off, or how to deal with conflict, how to express love. Elaine says, what happened when trauma is not dealt with in a healthy and loving manner? Yes. So in regard to this family that's in a very awake and shocking and painful place, they are having their challenges dealing with trauma, and trauma can beget more trauma. Trauma, when it's not addressed, festers and perpetuates, right? And it has tremendous negative consequences. And sometimes the people that are engaged in the trauma just don't have the skills to be able to navigate it well. And things get swept under the rug, and then they fester. So Rosalind says, grew up with scarcity. I don't know. I don't throw anything away. That's very common for people that grew up through the Depression as well. Growing up with scarcity, not throwing anything away, has kept me from purging things I don't need. It's a work in progress. I have compassion for myself to not suffer feeling like I'm not making any progress, allowing room to shift concept of deadlines or needing to complete things by a certain time. Wow, that's packed with a whole bunch of stuff there, Rosalind. So first, the pattern of scarcity. And so when we operate from a pattern of scarcity, then, we tend not to be throwing things away, and we end up being oppressed by the the overwhelm of the things that we've accumulated. And so as you nourish and nurture yourself, Rosalind, to feel more whole and complete, the experience of scarcity, I think, will lift. And that's awesome. When we come to a greater place of trust, also the experience of scarcity can lift, and then there's more choice. And then you talk about having compassion for yourself, and just allowing yourself to be without pressuring yourself with deadlines, and and then beating yourself up if you don't make those deadlines. Good for you. That's awesome. And that is a step towards self-love for sure, is to have loving compassion for ourselves where we are, where we are. And Robert says, and from my side, homeless, which I recovered from, seeing it was a disadvantage when I realized that the world itself is my home. Wow. Wow, Robert. That's that's a big one. Um, I don't even know. I love the revelation of recognizing the world as your home, and um, seeing. I'm am I correct in assuming and understanding that you're now, oh, homelessness. Okay, am I correct in understanding that do you currently have a home? And so a house, a place to live. So I have a friend who does a lot of work with people that are homeless, and he has adopted instead the phrase houseless because they have homes within communities and within they have a place to live, but they don't have a house, for instance. And so Robert says, yes, I do have a home now. I'm glad to hear that. And it sounds like there was a tremendous journey, like to recognize that the world is your home. That's huge. And it's interesting because perhaps houselessness or homelessness in some respect is is an extreme version of feeling not belonging, and recognizing the world as your home gives you a greater sense of belonging, I would imagine. Elaine says, yes, I have love and I am able to hold the light from a place of no mind, no attachment to serve others. But one must master their emotional body, heal their trauma within to be able to stand with others and their trauma and pain without judgment. Only compassion is needed here. Yes, so it's often our trauma can be a profound gift when we commit ourselves to healing, because then it gives us, as I said, we heal backwards and forwards generationally, and also as more and more of us heal ourselves, we are healing humanity. And that gives us, as we heal, we have the strength to be present to others' trauma, and to be able to support them more effectively. Lisa says, when it came to fight or flight, my family chose fight. Me being different from them chose flight. I don't think there's any purpose to a fight. I leave and you want to talk like a grown up, call me. The anger my brother and sister have is unreal. I chose change. I hear your strength, Lisa. Congratulations. Sometimes it takes so much more strength to leave or and to not fight. Sometimes it takes tremendous presence. And there's, you know, there's the part of us that gets to say this is a toxic situation and I'm out of here. So I get it. I totally get it. Elaine, Elaine is saying thank you to Rosalind for the clarity with which she expressed. And Gia, good morning. Good morning. It's wonderful to have you here with us as always. We're talking about family and inherited patterns. And Robert says, yes, I do have a home now. I read that. And Lisa says, I heard that I heard that term for the first time last week. I think you're referring to houseless. Um, and so Robert says, yes, I have a house, but I don't consider it as a home so much, working on it to transform it into a home. So I think that we creating home is a transformation, and to create home where we are is a transformation. Very, very powerful. Um, and Elaine says to Robert, Robert, the insight from within you shines as beautiful, shines so beautifully. It does, Robert. Indeed, it does. And Elaine says, yes, all is a gift on the journey a walk to remember. Yes. So we get to transform ourselves. And Gia says, oh, I love this group and love how everyone expresses themselves. I do too, Gia. It's lights up my day every day to be able to spend this time with you and to be sharing so deeply, to be looking at how we do get to grow and transform, and in the process of doing so, how we really do shift the frequency on the planet. And I think that when we recognize the trauma that we've experienced in our own lives, we can imagine the trauma that our parents and their parents and their parents and their parents, etc., may have experienced. And we are living in a time where people are much more oriented toward transformation, are much more oriented toward emotional intelligence and awareness and healing. And imagine suffering through the challenges of life without any way to find relief. We're blessed to be in an era where people are waking up to emotional intelligence. Gia says, I'm learning to create home within my heart as I have beautiful family outside me, loving, supporting, but I'm learning to be comfortable within myself. The reason why I'm here with you and others in the group, Mira. Thank you. Thank you, Gia. And it's wonderful to be able to have the support and to be growing in love and compassion for yourself. And we are blessed in so many ways, even when we feel great despair, to be on a path of waking up. And Elaine says, I've heard it said, if you feel you are enlightened, go. If you feel you're enlightened, go visit your family. Exactly, Elaine. Oh my gosh, isn't that the truth? Welcome, Andrea. Great to have you here. It's true. Like family, we've been talking a lot about family this week because that's what's up for me in a big way. Is issues around family, and just I've been thinking a lot about family and my personal immediate family history and beyond. And it's there is no quicker place to find your triggers than to go be with family, right? um, some of us are really blessed to have warm and supportive family environments, and even in those cases there are triggers that get activated too. So um, yeah, Maggie definitely agrees. So I I'm very intrigued by this concept of inheritance and inheritance of emotional patterns. And I encourage you to look in your life, in your family history too, to see what kind of patterns there are. It's remarkable to me how so many patterns continue to repeat. And when we become aware of them, unfortunately, awareness is not necessarily adequate to dissolve the patterns, but it's a necessary first step for sure. So I think that's it for today. I again so appreciate this time with you. I'm Mira Rubin. This is Maggie. And we go live each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page. And please check out the other awesome programming on the Enlightened World Network. It's a wonderful community, heart centered folks people waking up. And Elaine says, for me, all is welcome in my life. And Rosalind says, my dad got his second vaccine, so I'll be visiting him soon. I'll report back how strong my enlightenment shield works. Yes, well, that'll be a good test for sure. That's funny, Rosalind. And thank you again to all of you. In the meantime, before we meet again, check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network. And I hope to see you again back here really soon. And until then, lots and lots of love.